Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics. Well, notice post covering finance and property news. It's Monday again, Edwin's back again, and Edwin, the confusion continues, the spruiking continues. It's incredible. I just cannot believe they've turned up the property market to 11, and unfortunately a lot of people are believers.
And on top of that, Martin, I've got onto LinkedIn and Facebook, and I'm getting smashed with everybody wanting to promoting buy in Melbourne, buy an apartment, buy off the plan. That was the reason why I left Facebook and LinkedIn in the first. One of the main reasons why I left, but now I'm back on. It's just incredible. This is where people that follow us and people that watch the show and have been following us for a long time, they are well ahead of the curve. They get the news 3 to 6 months ahead of where the mainstream media is, and these spruikers that are pushing for these one-trick pony areas all over Australia, and now there's a big push to buy in UAE and in Japan, of all places. I mean, look, this is where people have got to do the numbers. They've got to do the numbers. They've got to do the research. They've got to look at things, with a very, very strong microscope, with a very strong, magnifying glass, and go granular, as you say, because 80% of what's out there should be put in the rubbish. There's the paper that it's written on, it's not worth, not even worth its toilet paper. The other 15%, is wishful thinking, and there's only small evidence that would show you what you should really follow. But you've got to dig at it. You've got to research it. You've got to stay calm. And don't get emotional. That's my favorite point. Don't get emotional, because emotion will be the death of you.
Well, I think that's very important, Edwin. And emotion, unfortunately, clouds vision, and particularly at auctions, but not just at auctions as well. I've had a few conversations with one-on-one people, my one-on-one conversations this week. It's been very interesting. So there are a couple of first-time buyers who are anxious to get into the market to take account of the most recent government support. And then when you actually pay it back, you sort of think about, well, what is that repayment going to look like, even with the, the government support? Because effectively there is still the question of, can you have capacity to borrow? Property investors are struggling as well. I've had a number of conversations last week with property investors in Melbourne who are desperate to get out of property, and property investors with units, yes, but also property investments in the housing sector as well, in houses, in standalone houses, the ones that you would expect to hold their value better. Well, when you do the numbers, and I've done quite detailed analysis with these people, when you check the money coming in and the money going out, you start to realize that there is a massive gap between what they think's happening and what's actually happening. In fact, I made a show called The Property Investment Mirage yesterday, which I published specifically to show that, in fact, all is not well in property investing in Australia. And unfortunately, the spruiking is getting louder and louder. Of course, Catalyst leads the charge with their latest information saying Australian property market nears 12 trillion as the national price momentum builds. Well, we'll see about that. And then, of course, this one here, first home buyer urgency fuels auction action. Although actually, if you look closely, it's not quite as powerful as the headline might suggest. And in fact, the latest information on property auctions show that there's some significant wobbliness, especially in Victoria, which we'll come back to. And when you actually look at it and think about it in the round, you think, well, there's a really big gap between what the spruikers are actually on about and what's really going on down on the ground in real suburbs where real people are trying to make decisions. And I think it's a bit like they're trying to listen to music when there's a massive noise, a plane going overhead or something similar, right, from all of the mainstream spruiking and from the property portals and all of those different channels. That noise is deafening many people. And frankly, they're just not understanding what's going on. And I find that really worrying and concerning. And the result of all of this is, of course, we've got people who are making really, really bad decisions at the moment. And again, I've had conversations this last week with a few people who are really thinking, I got to jump, because if I don't jump, I'll never jump now, And well, just be a little bit careful, be cautious, no emotion, be methodical. Oh, and by the way, as you pointed out in your one of your pieces of information you flipped across to me, we are still falling behind the housing target dramatically, right? So we've still got this lack of supply. And of course, people are using this as an excuse to say, see, prices are still going to go higher. Well, some prices may go higher, but there's a difference between price and valuation and fair value. And I just think people are really being deceived at the moment.
Yeah, look, I like your analogy with regards to the noise. I mean, I liken it to trying to listen to music and you've got jumbo jets flying above you from all directions. It's like when you're trying to have a conversation in these modern day coffee shops, Martin. Everybody once it becomes louder and the music gets pumped up even more, and because the music gets pumped up, you can't even enjoy the bloody coffee. You pick up your coffee in a takeaway cup and you go to the park and you have your meeting there in the park because coffee shops are just too loud. Yeah, but look, the noise, the emotional noise, the guilt that is that's placed on a lot of people because they're not getting into the market. There's so much happening. I mean, there's the noise around, as I said, on LinkedIn and on Facebook. There's a big drive at the moment for getting involved with Airbnb. This is it, Airbnb this and Airbnb that. I mean, I can name you a number of suburbs in the Sydney region that Airbnb just that hasn't been working since the new regulations came into play. The parts of the South Coast, and I dare say also the Central Coast are going to get hit hard because of the residential tenancy regulations that were changed 4 or 5 months ago, and the effect that that's having. I mean, but you don't hear those stories. You only hear the invest. And as we were talking earlier on, Martin, when you get these fanciful ideas, these emotion driven investment vehicles, right? Whether it be property, whether it be crypto, whether it be shares, whatever it be, whether it be sardine cans or baked beans or whatever you want to invest in, but it's all driven by emotion. You just got to take a step back, take a deep breath, and pull it apart, because as we keep on saying, not everything that shines is gold. That's the first thing. And the second thing is you got to ask yourself the question, how much are the people that are pushing you in that direction copying by way of a commission from those that are promoting? Because the ladder in property at the moment sits at about 8%. In other words, take 8% of the value of whatever property you've been told to invest, particularly if it's new and off the plan or a land subdivision somewhere. You can be assured that the marketing company is getting an 8% kickback from the developer. The developers increase the price by another 2-3% because they're saying, hey, if you as a marketing company can earn 8% on what I'm putting out, I'm going to load the price on top of that again. So effectively, you as a consumer, as a buyer, you're tipping 10% more than what the true value of that investment vehicle is. And I dare say that probably goes across many other investment vehicles. But in property, that's where we are at the moment. So you're looking at these properties that got bought off the plan, all these land subdivisions in Melbourne from back in 2017, back in 2018, 19. And even back then, if you pick up on what I was saying, I was saying, buyer beware, because these areas, it rang so hot and it rang quicker than the Sydney market, and now it's pulled back, obviously because of the political persuasions down there. But this is where people face the issues, with where you've got these, whether it's either a one-trick pony investment area, WA with mining, China gets the flu, and the Perth market shits itself. Goes into convulsions of diarrhea. Then there's the Northern Territory, again, your northern parts of Queensland. But yeah, there are some parts that have had that continual momentum. But in Sydney, as I go back from my initial point, in the Sydney region, I can pinpoint areas to anybody, and we've shared it on the show, where the changes to the Residential Tenancies Act has meant that there's a lot more properties being put on the market in these suburbs, and you can actually buy freestanding homes. I'm not talking about apartments. I'm talking about freestanding homes for what people were paying for them in 2021. So where's your capital growth? Where's your incentive? This is why people have got to go granular, and you've got to be careful as to who's promoting the investment. As I said, no matter whether it be property, crypto, shitcoin, whatever else you fancy, you want to invest in gold, silver, tobacco, sardine cans, whatever. Do your research. And I think with ChatGPT, Grok, and all these other AI tools, people are going to become more the wiser, and you should start using them and implementing them in your research. But let me finish off my point, Martin, with this. But there's a good start is your one-to-one analysis of the suburbs. It's a damn good start, and I'll be sharing more about that and promoting you as a partner, as a provider in services with a new business that we're heading off. So but this is the reason why I'm keen on promoting this service is because it puts people in the know, and this is where the future is all about. To be in the know. We're here. We've been talking the way we've been talking for a number of years is to bring about transparency and clarity into the murky waters of the real estate industry and construction. That's what we're about. And we will continue to do that. And no matter what platform we're on and we're sitting on, I believe that myself, we will continue to speak. I won't be as cheeky as what I have been in the past, perhaps, but taper down. And we will have to taper down a little bit more, otherwise we'll get deplatformed from the e-commissioner, e-Karen. But it's all about transparency. It's all about clarity. So we're these are the tools that people need to avail themselves of, Mark. Otherwise, headlines like, first year shortfall of 66,000 homes in 1.2 million housing target. Yeah, of course, it's going to scare a lot of people. Look, and but we should also be reading, the other effects of that. But that is the central focus point right now. Is we've got to understand is where does the government want us to go? Where are we? Where is it really leading us to, Mark? Why are the politicians pushing? And that's from the left and the right. Why are they pushing in the way that they're doing? As I say, this isn't haphazard. This is orchestrated. And if people can't see that this whole thing is orchestrated, I mean, you're still stuck in the lockdowns in the basement of your house or the loft of your property or in your garage. But this is all orchestrated. And once you peel that onion, once you peel that and you get with the program, you will understand more as to where things are going. But look, we got to be prepared. But preparedness is all about due diligence.
Absolutely. Well, we are living in very uncertain times, and just in terms of looking at the momentum and looking at people reacting. Well, maybe not very logically. I think this is a great example. This is actually the queues outside ABC Bullion. People desperate now to own gold. Well, gold has gone up 11% on average, if you take the aggregate over the last few years, because of the most recent run-up. But just to be clear, if you actually stand back and look at it, actually the run-up this time is not necessarily that flash. And of course, in past run-ups, we then had big corrections afterwards. So Again, people need to go and get the information before they start listening to the spruiks. And remember that there are people out there who are trying to sell you stuff because they make commission on the way through. And there is money changing hands below the surface here that nobody can actually see. And that actually means that you aren't necessarily getting good information. That's why going granular, that's why one-to-one conversations, and that's why what you're doing now is so important, because what we can do is strip back to facts and information rather than the spruiks. And look, more broadly, I'd made a show called When Markets Confuse as Things Fall Apart. That is the point at the moment. There are cockroaches everywhere, right? As Jamie Dimon said, right? There's cockroaches in all over the place. And so you really do need to be really cautious and not just get swept up with the latest spruiking, the latest articles that are being written by people who only want to get clicks. That's, of course, their motivation. They're rewarded on getting big amounts of clicks. So they'll say anything and do anything. Oh, and by the way, just a few facts just to give people a little bit of insight. The first one is this. There is now record low birth rates because parents are now leaving it a lot later to have kids, because, of course, it's much more difficult to be able to form a household because they don't have anywhere to live. And so the median age of mothers in the ACT was 32.8 years, while fathers was highest in Victoria at 34.4 years. Those are significant numbers, and that tells you something about future demand. And interestingly, of course, the Home Affairs Minister, Tony Burke, refused to put a number on the government's ideal immigration intake, which sort of is another way of saying, oh, well, we need to keep these numbers up, blah, 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 blah. But there's an important point. Immigration is still stoking quite a lot of demand, but again, it's not uniformly spread. And one of the things I've realized when I've been talking to people is people are assuming that the immigration story means that all suburbs have the same demand. No. That's not true. It is very, very different in different areas around the place. And that's something else that people need to understand, because I could point to suburbs in Sydney where there is very high demand, specifically from new migrants. I can point to you other areas where there is much less demand available, and in fact, almost no one wants to move. And there's an article here saying there are suburbs where owners are staying put. This one was talking about Cherrybrook, one of Sydney's most cherished suburbs, with Catality research showing home sellers have held their properties for a median 18.1 years. And, there's some recommendations here about the Sutherland Shire or Cronulla as possibly an interesting area. And then this article here, which is quite interesting, there are suburbs where homes have got cheaper. Since the end of February, dwelling values have fallen by 7.1% in Sydney's lower North Shore suburb of Milson Point, and 6.3% in neighbouring Kirribilli, according to Catality. And in Melbourne, Armadale, down 5.1%, and 4.5% in Paran. In the inner north, Carlton fell 4.5%. Hey, this is an example where prices are actually on the way down rather than the way up. Now, how often is that reported or not reported, huh?
Well, this is the thing, man. But look, the bigger, the broader picture there is the fact, like, obviously they work on recent sales figures, and then their algorithms work around the square meter of the land, the number of bedrooms, car spaces, and so on and so on and so on. Now, because of there's not that many transactions, and the transactions that have occurred, there are a lot they've come down a lot lower. So that's another point that needs to be raised. And going back to your western suburbs areas, like the Cherrybrooks, they're where people want to stay there longer. I mean, there are many other suburbs as well where they can't move. And basically, you look at a lot of the homes there in Cherrybrook, they're monstrous. They're big homes, and they're going to get to a point where they're going to demand big dollars in order to get them renovated or get them up to speed as well. And the upkeep will be huge, because obviously the bigger that house, the more you need to spend to renovate it. one of the things that we've been talking to a lot of property managers of late, and one of the phenomenons as well is that there's a bit of a retreat from, and this again, you heard it first on the Monday evening property rants with Martin and myself on DFA Walk the World, and that is that a lot of investors in parts of the western region of Sydney have decided not to originally, let's say, as early as 3-4 weeks ago, they were talking about putting the properties on the market for sale, getting out because of the cost of upkeep, to maintain these properties, because they're from subdivisions that happened in the mid 80s, late 80s, so they require a lot of maintenance now, especially to keep up to date with the regulations, with the Residential Tenancies Act. Now, a lot of people have opted to keep them under as an investment property. Why? Because the tenants don't want to move. They will absorb a huge increase in rent in order to stay, which is again something that you and I have been talking about, and the mainstream media aren't really picking that up because they get their news bulletins, they get the news stories from rental bond board transactions, and because there aren't a lot of rental bond board transactions, and you don't top up your rental bond board lodgement or deposit from when you start a tenancy to if you get a rental increase, you don't call up the rental bond board and say, hey, I want to top up my bond. It stays as per the original agreement, and the rent could climb 10, 15, 20, 30% whilst you stay in the property, and the bond stays fixed. So, and this is what the mainstream don't pick up on, except obviously when you talk to people on the ground and at grassroots level. So this is what's happening in a lot of areas where where a lot of people were expecting for spring to really sprout with a lot of new properties on market, and they haven't. And this is where a lot of things have come short. And this again goes back to what we often talk about, and that is government policy, what it does, the demand that it drives, and this is what a lot of investors are going toe to toe with first-time buyers, and have pushed those prices up. So there's a lot of moving parts with the market, and trying to understand the demographics of every suburb and of every region. It's quite a big task, and for somebody that's new, that's fresh, trying to move, or somebody that hasn't transacted for 20, 30 years, and now they're in a way forced to transact because of that they have to move on because of health issues. The home is too big, they want to downsize, all these sorts of things. It is very, very difficult, and so look, it is. Going back to our initial conversation, we go back to there has to be a lot more transparency. There has to be you and I are going to very much occupy a big space in the future moving forward, because the free information that we give, as well as obviously the paid services that we provide to our clients and members that come through. But why are we in this position? We're in this position, unfortunately, because, as I said earlier, this is all orchestrated. And there is no way in hell that the libs are going to give you a fixed number as well on immigration numbers. And this is why they got trashed in the last election. One of the many reasons why they got trashed in the last election as well. But moving forward, who knows what's going to happen with those policies, but other than the fact that politicians nor the industry want the property values to go down because there's too much invested. Out of the $12 trillion, I'd like to, wouldn't it be interesting to see how many ex-politicians, local current politicians and real estate agents own investment properties?
Well, I believe that Mr. Burke may have 6, as I recall, looking at the recent numbers. So that might have something to do with wanting immigration to stay high. And it's interesting, of course, that MIMS has now come out and has said that they're going to enshrine all of the recent changes in something called the Housing Delivery Authority. The HDA, established in January, has the power to set significant developments on a fast track, bypassing local councils. And Mims said that it's been convenient to blame council for refusing looming developments. But it's a bit of an excuse, etc., etc. Now, that was quite an interesting angle. And of course, there is a very significant point here that the states are being rewarded from central government if they meet their housing targets. So there is a budget imperative that the various states need to achieve, and they're going to put pressure on the councils. And, the YIMBY-NIMBY conversation is then continuing. And the other angle here it's worth just reflecting on is this one. Of course, we had the jobless number this last week, which was a little higher. It's amazing how the media and markets all turned because they were previously suggesting no rate cuts this year, maybe a rate cut middle of next year. And now all of a sudden, because Australia's jobless rate jumped to 4.5% in September, that's a 4-year high, which was higher than expected. Now there are heightened expectation of interest rate cuts. Now, there is, I think, a catch here, and that is that this is just one data point. We've still got the inflation number to come. And I'm not sure that people should be banking on these rate cuts. Again, going back to my one-to-one conversation, interestingly, a number of people have run their math and their sort of cash flows on the assumptions that they're going to get 3 or 4 more cash rate cuts, which means that the mortgage is going to be about 1% cheaper than what is currently available in the market. Now, that's okay as one scenario, but what I say to people is you should run a different scenario too. What happens if you don't get those rate cuts? What happens if interest rates stay where they are? Which is quite feasible, knowing what else is going on at the moment. How would that change your financial outlook and change your ability to be able to make those mortgage repayments? And people are a bit shocked that I actually would suggest they do that. So there is a thing which I'm beginning to realize, and it's partly because of all this spruiking, it's partly because of all the noise out there. There is huge optimism in the minds of people who are thinking about buying property. And it's almost they get fixated on the optimism and don't think about the other side of the coin. Now, I'm still very much a fan of property. I've owned property for years and years and years and will continue to do so. But there are also other things you need to think about. And so trying to have this balanced conversation, now the good news and the bad news, the good information that will help you make good decisions, and also the doubts you need to consider and the scenarios you need to consider if things went differently. They are pieces of the conversation you need to have. And unfortunately, what I find in my one-to-one conversations, Edwin, is that people just are not capable of doing that. And that's a problem because given the level of uncertainty, you've got to expect more uncertainty ahead. Things are not suddenly going to blossom into, lovely blue sky, the birds are singing, everything's perfect, prices are actually really affordable. No, that's not the world we're in. So it's really important that people do the work and keep these things in balance.
Well, you touch on a couple of points that are very important points, and this is the conundrum that many people are in, and this is in a way the conundrum that the government's in as well. So if you let's say you look at the optimistic push from Mins and all the other state politicians that want to drive the housing numbers up, well, they've got to do that. The only way that's going to happen really is if interest rates come down, because that is one of the ways that developers are going to move forward. You've got to make it affordable. You've got to make it. You've got to make it. Also, it's got to work in the feasibility studies in order to build, because construction costs are just going through the roof and will continue to rise. For the next 3 to 5 years. So that's a bit of a conundrum there. So now let's say that the interest rates did come down, right? So what happens on the other side of that ledger is the fact that and you've got this push from the state governments to build, and to give developers that uptick in numbers to develop on the land envelopes. Well, guess what, Martin? The counter to that, and this happens immediately. It's not even interest payable over the term of the loan. This is, you're paying for this, in a way you're paying for it up front, and that is the value of land goes up. So that's your counter as well to that. So this is where people have got to be very, very careful. So and look at one of the subs I was talking about over the weekend with one of our clients. Because he was tracking more in jest than anything where his position was and the move that he made earlier in the year. And we look at the area of Panania, and we look at the land, because of the big push there to subdivide lots there into duplex sites. So we're 8 months ago when we bought, helped him buy in that area. We were buying for the land value of about, let's say it was about $1,500 per square metre to $1,700 per square metre. Bring it forward in terms of months now, say 8 to 10 months from purchase to settlement, say call it 10 months, and the value of the land there has increased in value to over $2,300 per square metre. Why? Because of the development potential now. So, and this is now, and the rezoning of many parts of many regions or many suburbs of Sydney. So as soon as that happens, and like we go back to Woollahra, where they've got this fanciful idea that they're going to build 10,000 apartments in and around the old train station there. As I said, by the time you're able to buy that stuff, by the time they rezone it, by the time the developers buy the land, by the time you start building and have any, and you do a reverse feasibility on the construction costs, you're going to be paying $2.3 million for a 2-bedroom apartment, albeit, it's right next door to Darling Point. It's in ritzy area. It's going to make that whole area ritzy. It's going to revamp the whole that whole back section, but that's your entry level now. Now, how many first home buyers want to jump in the market at $2.3 million? So this is where the governments don't think it through, and when they push these policies through, and they've got this news article saying, "Oh yeah, we're going to fight the local governments because we want to build, we want to go higher." You've got to do your numbers. It all comes back to the numbers. What did the numbers say at the end of the day? One. Secondly, what do people want? Also, Martin, this is why. One thing is overseas students and short-term visas that are given out, and you've got this rental accommodation in these high-rise developments that you could get good rents, not because of your traditional form of renting the damn thing, but because of your budget accommodation, your self-managed cash in the hand rental scenarios. But because if it was under a traditional method of rental, they just don't make sense. They just don't make any. There's no value to them whatsoever. And then as you were saying earlier on, you got your depreciation, and then you got your cost. So the value of the property doesn't go up. You're depreciating. How much of it can you depreciate off your tax anyway? And in the meantime, at the end of the day, you end up with 10 years down the track, you end up with a property that you've been paying out of pocket expenses, albeit the depreciation's helped you along the way, but you've made nothing on it. You were better off leaving the leaving the those $1 and $2 notes underneath your mattress, over the period, and pull them out, because even the old $1 and $2 notes, if you recall, they're worth a lot more now than the printed value. For so you were better off doing that, right? So, but this is as I said, this is the conundrum, and this is why government policy, politicians, they don't understand the industry. Then and then they rely on people that push their wheelbarrow to get professional advice in order to come up with policy changes. It's like the previous policy changes from the previous state government that put together the think tank, and they got an auctioneer to help them put together the new regulations around underquoting and the like. So this is the craziness of the whole thing, right? So it's like inviting Triggerboff to become a part of a think tank to put together a policy around affordable housing. Just talking shit.
Well, you've got a very good point there. And of course, the latest data shows that we've actually got continued decline. If this is actually from Tariq, look at the rolling 12-month dwelling completions from 2019 to 2025. We are actually at historically low levels, right? And well below the 240,000 Albanese government target. No, we always knew that was going to be the case. And it's partly because of the delays, partly because of the extra costs. Other interesting observation is that the UK had a 1.5 million 5-year target to build. And the report came out today in the UK also that they're well under target. Why? For precisely the same reasons as in Australia. The approvals process takes too long. The costs are actually rising. So a lot of properties are not actually starting. And the average duration to complete a particular property is blown out of all proportion. Now, that is something to do with skills. It's something to do with regulation. And it's something to do perhaps with capacity of the firms to do it too. So this is actually a very interesting observation. So we're not in the situation where we're going to be able to achieve anything like the growth that the governments are aspiring to. And then just to recap what you said earlier on, and they are not building the type of property that most people desire to live in. And that's the other problem. So they can build stuff, but is it actually stuff that people want to live in? Probably not. And that's the other thing that I think sometimes people don't take on board. So because of all those various issues, we are going to see continued stress and strain in the property market for a long, long time ahead. It's not going to actually shake out anytime soon. And again, what that means is that people need to be really careful about the decisions they take. And of course, the fallout, and this is the thing that I always come back to, the fallout is not just for those trying to get into the property market, but there's a significant impact on the rental market too. In fact, this article came out with the alarm at out-of-reach rental numbers. Sydney's rental crisis is now so stark that only 1% of property would be classed as affordable for essential workers. And that's really the point. We've been talking about this for a long, long time. Anglicle's annual rental affordability snapshot revealed 17,028 rental listings, but most of them just beyond the pale in terms of affordability. And so what I'm trying to get to here, Edwin, is that, sure, individuals are making decisions about trying to get into property or not, but there is this broader social issue which is being created, and that social issue is now coming home to roost with people unable to live in certain areas because they can't find anywhere to live at all. And that means that you can't get essential workers where you need them. And interestingly, even Roy Morgan actually came out with their most up-to-date stress analysis. They use stress differently to the way that we do it. But they're saying that there's 27.9% of owner-occupied mortgage holders in difficulty. And that's, not a good news. It's higher than it's been for some time. And once again, it shows you that there are these broader social and economic consequences. And it goes right back to what you said. There is a plan that was laid out by government some time back, to try and do X, but X is not actually necessarily leading to a good outcome for most people, whether you're owning property, whether you're trying to get into the property market, or whether you're renting. But they're sort of putting the veneer over the top of, oh, don't worry, property prices are continuing to go higher. Don't worry, folks, that's great. And of course, you can do that because private sector credit continues to grow. And private sector credit, by the way, is growing more strongly for investors than owner-occupiers. So the investment sector is still stoking the credit growth, which the banks love, but that means that investors are actually in some difficulty. And I'm still seeing more property investors on the same page trying to sell their investment property. So you can see just how messed up this whole story is. And I don't know what the answer is, but it's not actually going in any way right the right direction at the moment. And I don't think that anything that I'm seeing from governments at state or federal level are going to change it. Maybe, Edwin, what we need is AI to come in and solve it for us. What do you think?
Yeah, well, look, yours truly, I got caught up in one of those AI posts as well. I thought that post was real. As I now understand it, it's not real. But this is where we've got to be careful. This is where there's a lot of information out there, and I was quick to repost that. I thought it was interesting, but with everything, there's there's information and there's real information. We're going to get a lot more of misinformation, and with regards to property and everything else, it's going to be more misinformation from those that are orchestrating it the way that they want it to play out. But everything else, we got to look at it. But look, my saving grace to that me falling for AI in that post about the new fines coming up for if you're drinking or coffee or eating in your vehicle, then you're going to get cop up to $1,500 fine. Well, Topher Field put out an interesting video. I like what he says. Most of the time, not all the time. Most of the time, is interesting. And talking about the AI cameras, how they're going to turn them on very soon. If not already, but I can tell you now, and the reason why I agree with what Topher says in that video is because one of our good clients is actually runs a business in his operation is to go all around New South Wales setting up these cameras. There are many groups out there, and he's one of them. His team are one of the teams, and before I even saw this video that Topher put out, they were already telling me. But then again, he goes back to a step further back to why. Why is all this happening? Why? And it's not because of what Topher says on the video, but because of what we've been talking about, the way that things have been playing out since 2020, and that it's all about control. It's all about control. Why is there such a big push for the high-rise development? Because it's going to get more expensive to travel further out than your central hubs. Not only for fuel, energy, if you got an EV, whatever, but in terms of now all these potential fines and risks. I spend a lot of time on the road, Martin, and every day is a huge risk, not only in terms of getting fines, copping a fine, or speeding, or getting pulled over by the cops on the way home. When I'm sort of somewhat half relaxed and not thinking, thinking about things and not thinking about the speed limits and so forth. But also the risks on the road, and the congestion that we find now on the road, the fact that it's also over the last 6 to 12 months, there are more trucks and slow drivers on the right-hand lanes, and slowing things down. So there's a lot more aggression on the road. There's a lot more happening on the road. But again, it's going back to why are these people wanting to get away from the high rise living. The government's trying everything within their power to keep them within a short distance away from the central hubs, but obviously, and as I say, the value's in the land, and hence the reason why you've got these. There's going to be very little to no homes under $1 million in the Sydney region. We're getting close to the end of the year, and I'd say we're probably pulling closer to the few hundred now, and that people can buy to avail themselves of that bit of land. And goes back to high rise isn't what people want, but the government is not spending in infrastructure to help assist families into these dwellings. So therefore, the prices can only go up in a lot of areas. But it's a conundrum. It's a real is it a conundrum? It's a quagmire. All sorts of things are happening all at once. But it's very, very critical now. We're at a time where we need to be very open-eyed about the way that we move forward with our investment side of things, as well as your residential, whether it be a tenancy. So many critical points, because the pressures just to get by on a day-to-day basis is getting high, and this is the price that we're paying as a community, as a nation, because of the silly decisions that the governments have made for the last 20 years.
Absolutely, and I'll just give you one little anecdote. It's fascinating to me that when I talk with people about moving further out, so I've talking to a first-time buyer recently saying, well, we're looking a long way out because property is a little cheaper. I said, okay, have you calculated the costs of traveling from that new location that you're looking at to the central business district in Sydney? Because you're going to need to do that multiple times a week. And from where you are at the moment, you probably can't get a train without traveling first to get to a station to get a train. And if you travel by car, what is the costs of the various tolls that you actually have to pay to be able to get from A to B? And we went into quite a long and detailed conversation, and I started talking with them about these 15-minute city ideas, which of course are all over the place at the moment, as being effectively the ideal future. In other words, you live and work in a local area. And of course, local councils all over the country are getting quite excited by this idea. And, with high rise, well, I can keep people closer in. So that means that they don't have to travel so far. And that means that we can reduce emission and all those sorts of things. So there's a really interesting contention here, because sure, you may decide to go further out, but then you've got to think about the time it takes, the extra costs. And what I went through with this particular client was that when you plug those extra costs into the spreadsheet as to what the running costs would be of what they were planning to do, they'd be worse off by going further out, not better off. And that was a complete revelation to them, because they hadn't actually joined the dots between moving from A to B and the costs, not just of the property, but the costs of life once they'd actually moved from A to B. And I do think that this is a really important object lesson. And I find it fascinating. I don't know what you think, Edwin, but a lot of the real estate conversations with people are only about the property and the features of the property, which is sort of understandable. But, you wrote an article, and I think it's a very relevant article, because for many in the real estate agency industry, well, it's all about ego, isn't it? It really is fundamentally, it's about celebrating the sales rather than celebrating the people who entrusted them with that transaction. And there's a real cultural problem that I think is now coming back into the industry.
Yeah, and it's how did we get to this ego loop? In real estate, we forgot about we've forgotten about the individuals that we're meant to that we're meant to serve by way of being vendors and clients. The industry, we're getting to a period now in the year that there's going to be a lot of celebrations and a lot of accolades and trophies and everything given out to agents, and and most of the time it's all performance based around sales and not necessarily building those relationships. But this is the thing, Martin. People are making making decisions. Going back to your point about traveling, and it comes back to the needs of an individual. Look, I travel a lot. And we made a decision to come to the mountains, and we knew that we were going to be, spending a lot more time on the road. Thank God that it's on the road. I mean, if it was purely catching public transport, that would have had a different conversation. Dusty, Evan, and the gang would have stayed put in Sydney. We wouldn't move because public transport is dreadful in the mountains, especially if there's something happens on the lines, then you're screwed. You might as well call him sick or work from home. Sometimes but for us, there's got to be trade-offs, and these are the conversations that I'm sure you have with your one-to-ones as well. There are some families that are willing to make those trade-offs.
Yep.
There are some families that can't afford to make those trade-offs, and it's not just a monetary value in those trade-offs, Martin. It's you can't afford to make them because guess what? Because there is no infrastructure, there is no hospital facilities. There aren't. There's no development of any data for health, and this is where we go back to how it's all being orchestrated, and we're all being corralled into those 15-minute cities all over the world. How they're going to handle with the lifestyle of the mountains is going to be a wait and see, and the broad land mass that many states have, and how we spread out. It's going to be very, very interesting. But look, this is where people are making decisions based on the economic well-being, the future, the work. The work position, whether or not they can work from home, how often can they work from home, so all these things come into play. But I agree with you, and that is that people unfortunately are persuaded by the agents and agencies that their drive is to push you, is to not work with you, but push you into a transaction, into a purchase where you're going to regret it later on. And as you do your one-to-ones with and what you show them, and in the many conversations that I've had over the decades with people that have bought in areas, I mean, it's interesting how you can get to drive. You can get to test drive a car, but you can't really test drive the most valuable asset that you're going to buy, right?
That's
crazy.
A very good point. In fact, I make the point, Edwin, that I've said to a few people, because they go and visit a property at the weekend, right, when it's quiet. We'll go back and look at the same suburb during the week, right, during rush hour, during school run hour, etc., and maybe listen to see what the noise levels is like and the traffic levels are like at other times. It amazes me how often people don't do that. So they don't even test drive the location at all. People, you need to actually understand it doesn't necessarily look like it looks like on a Sunday morning when everyone's still asleep.
Yeah, and this is a good point that you make, Mike, because a lot of people have, and we're not given the time. This is the thing. We're not given the time. People aren't given the adequate time to do due diligence. You get to do more due diligence on a bloody secondhand Toyota from a secondhand dealership than what you do to buying a property. Okay, let's say at $1.3 million. It's crazy, and you're forced into making decisions, or you're forced into in this. And going back to the beginning of the show, and that is, you really got to start. You really got to take a deep breath and take a step back. Or get a chair, or go to Bunnings and get a two-step ladder and stand up on it and look at the world from a different point of view. because many people get hoodwinked and they make silly decisions on a whim. Emotion drives their ego, and so emotion drives the decision, and the egos of those that are selling the property, it's what's driving them. Because if they don't push them by way of making them think that they're on the buyer side, well, guess what? They don't get the trophies at the end of the year in the awards night, and so forth. So that's why I write these stories. As I said, yes, I'm back on LinkedIn. Yes, I'm back on Facebook, but I'll still challenge the way the things are done to provide a better service where we can. Where Dustin, myself and the gang can provide a better service and a more transparent service. Helping people to prepare their homes for sale, helping them to manage the sale process, to help them to buy, and also assist them with rental accommodation as well. So it's we can only try, Martin. We can only try, but it's the numbers that are driving these things. Unfortunately, the numbers, the lack of volume, the volumes on market, the numbers, the immigration numbers. It's all as I always say, my fallback position. It's all about the numbers, because numbers just don't lie.
Yeah, well, just on the way out of this conversation and into the numbers, I will highlight the fact that there's less consumer protection for buying a property than buying that second-hand Toyota, which I've never understood, right? So actually, there is a really, really important point here that when you're actually going through that process about buying a property, you've got to be really careful and cautious. It's caveat emptor, let the buyer beware, which means you have to do the work. You have to actually not just take on trust what the agent says, not just take on trust what the local property portal says. You've actually got to do the work and make sure that you don't get trapped into buying a lemon, and there are plenty of lemons out there. Let's look at the numbers. So in Sydney, on the 13th, 22,823 properties available for sale as defined by domain, as in the Sydney region. And a week later, on the 20th, 23,453. And it's interesting that we've now got more than 10,400 houses for sale. There was a rise in both housing apartments, but houses actually a little bit more than growth there rather than units, which I thought was quite interesting. And looking at the trends here, you can see that the auction listings numbers, I should say, are actually now just coming up a little. They were, tracking a little bit different from last year, but there's still not a lot of really good stuff on the market, is there, Edwin?
No, there isn't, and although we're still, we're still seeing a lot more properties on the market, but as I said, the big difference here is the land envelopes, the house and land packages, as opposed to your established dwellings. So you've got to be careful how we look at these. But overall, we're tracking a lot more than last year. But this is where we've got to be careful. And as you said earlier on, it's there's a lot of there have been a lot of investors wanting to get out, a lot of owner occupiers that in the properties that demand a lot of work, and just polishing them up, giving them a bit of putting a bit of Mr. Sheen on the kitchen bench top, does the trick in a lot of places, because they end up getting a lot more for them without realizing that along with the cockroaches, that the cockroach infestation in between the gyprock and the stud walls and the brick wall, you also got other little buggers there that are not in the building reports. Melbourne, on the other hand, Melbourne is a different kettle of fish altogether.
Well, Melbourne, yes, on the 13th, 27,506. A week later, 27,767. So nowhere near as significant rise. And again, the mix is interesting. A lot of houses, of course, apartments, a little bit. But again, my analysis is about the fact that there are a lot of really quite difficult properties from a quality perspective that are on the market at the moment, and a lot of ex-investment properties still in the Melbourne market.
Yeah, and you've got 16,000 homes on the market for sale in the Melbourne region, according to Domain, and only just over 5,000 apartments. Huge difference from Sydney. But again, a lot of those houses are in your subdivisions and all your investment areas of Melbourne, where the WeChat chatterers and everybody else jumped in from 2017 to 2019, buying them off the plan in those subdivision estates, and as well, you've got a lot more land for sale, land on release for sale in Melbourne than what you do in Sydney.
Absolutely. Well, let's look at the Brisbane story, because the Brisbane story is, Brisbane goes along on its own little route, doesn't it? 3,309 on the 13th, 3,416 a week later. And I'm still amazed by the spruiking going on in the Brisbane market, despite the fact that in some cases prices are actually exorbitant relative to incomes. And if we look at the overall auction story, again, it is fascinating to just look at the difference between New South Wales and Victoria and what's going on there. What are you making of it, Edwin?
You look at those numbers. They're really alarming, right? You've got we've been tracking around between 600 and in the mid sixes and early sevens for Sydney after the school holidays and the long weekend. Now we're around the close to 700. But look at the people wanting to get out. Numbers of Melbourne by way of auction, by a quick sale, in and out. I mean, that's 1,000, just under 1,000 more auction listings in Melbourne. Now, this is where auctioneers are making a killing down there in Melbourne, because they get paid whether the property sells or not. If they get booked, they get paid. But whereas the auctioneers in Sydney, they haven't had a good drink for a while. It's all about get out of Victoria. And I think that trend is going to continue the way it is, and all because of the social policies with the current government. What is happening there? The demonstrations, the WeChat chatters haven't changed their mind about getting out of Victoria. They were the first ones to call it. They were the first ones to they set the trend in getting out. We told our followers and our viewers and everybody, we shouted it out loud when the WeChat chatters picked it almost 6 months before everybody else started bailing out. And there's no incentive, and there'll be more to come. In my opinion, this isn't financial advice. This isn't any form of advice other than observation, and all indicators are that the Melbourne market is going to continue to go down in terms of pricing in many areas, many parts, and still got perhaps another 5 to 10% before he plateaus and finds bottom, maybe.
Well, we'll see. And the interesting taker, you've got your chart back now, the auction numbers, and you can see the 24-25 comparisons are really quite interesting. So we are still, this is the Sydney story, isn't it? We've got a lower count of auctions in Sydney than last year by quite some.
Yeah, we're on average, it's about 33 to 35% lower listing numbers, sale by auction than in 2024. But look, looking at it, and as to and asking ourselves the questions as to why, I think there's three hurdles that this form of sale is facing. One is the new price demands that sellers are asking for the homes, in wanting or demanding a higher value. So it's really, we've broken the last we're continuously breaking ceilings in many of the markets of Sydney, but get to a point where people don't really can't afford it. It's really getting in some market just getting out of hand. So if they're not achieving those prices, the homes are being the last thing you want to do as an auctioneer or as an agent selling a property by way of auction, and it gets passed in, and then you can't pick up another listing from the neighbours. So the demand in prices from sellers is one of the hurdles. There's less and less property for sellers also to relocate. And this is a point that Ray Ellis, the CEO of Century 21, brought out, and that is, as well as Charles, when I interviewed them, and that is there's really not a lot of choice. And Ray pointed out the fact, people, that are the retirees, the empty nesters, the downsizers, when they, that they really want to downsize, but they can't, and they don't want to move more than 5-10 kilometres away from where they literally grew up or spent the last 50, 60 years of their life, and to move away from friends and family, medical facilities and places of worship. It's very difficult, very difficult to do. So that's another reason why the numbers are kept very, very low in the Sydney market. And the other one, Martin, is what I shared earlier on, and that is where in some areas where we were seeing a lot of properties come on the market that were ex-rentals, and were being auctioned off. Like your Kings Langleys, for example, in those areas around the Blacktown region, Kings Langley, Kings Park, where now they, because of the rental demand in those areas and the rents that are achieved, the landlords have changed their minds. They feel comfortable in keeping the tenant there because the tenant is willing to absorb a 5%, 10%, 15% increase. They have absorbed up to 20, 25% increase in the rent over the last couple of years, and will continue to absorb more because it's too costly for them to move. And it's again goes back to schools, places of worship, medical facilities, and the demographics. So there a lot of landlords have opted to tell their officers, the real estate officers, hey, forget about putting the property on the market for sale. We're no longer want out. We want to stay in because we received your good news that the tenant's willing to pay the extra 10%.
Absolutely right. Well, just quickly on the rentals. On the 6th of October, 9,750. On the 13th, 10,042. And in Melbourne on the 6th, 11,217. On the 13th, 11,767. And that reflects what I'm seeing at the moment, Edwin, that there's a little tick up in terms of available properties for rent, although the quality of quite a few of them are actually pretty suspect. But the rental growth is still there, and I highlighted earlier on the rental growth is a real problem. And I'm seeing that in both markets. People are being expected to pay more for, frankly, inferior property, and of course overlaid by the additional regulatory burden that's now being placed, certainly within Victoria, and now it's beginning to percolate up into Queensland and into New South Wales as well, making it more and more difficult for property investors to be able to actually offer property that meets requirements. And the pressure on potential renters to try and find something or to stay and just accept another rent increase is extreme. And again, in my one-to-one conversations this past week, I've had a couple of conversations with people in the rental sector, desperate to try and escape it, but also conscious that moving into owner occupation at the moment when things are where they are is extremely challenging. And they're absolutely caught in the headlights between paying more to stay renting where they are or to try and jump ship and find somewhere else to rent, but you're then competing with a lot of other people, or jumping ship and trying to get into the property market when, again, the stakes are really high and it's very difficult. And I just feel very, very concerned for a lot of these households who are trying to do the right thing and trying to get on and trying to, build a family and build a life. And it's as though the government, state and federal are just throwing rocks right in their face. And it's really, really sad to hear.
Yeah, look, it is, Martin. Those decisions aren't easy to make. They're hard calls. And you don't know whether the small commercial hubs of the region, the areas on just outside the Sydney region, when you start going over the mountains and you see small townships literally dwindle down to nothing, with a small change, and others start prospering. And again, when you're trying to raise a family, a small family, in its the beginnings, or get started, or simply retire, and there's a lot of moving parts. So it's becoming, it's sad. It's sad. You say that it's a stain in the face. I say it's more like a spit in the face by the politicians, which is even worse.
Absolutely. Well, as we come to the end of the show, you've just got a little observation about getting around.
Yeah, look, this is obviously, you touched on it earlier on. You read my tip before we started the show, and you decided to beat me to it. Yeah, look, it's about the where you're going to choose to live. So that's something that's in Rant. It's something that you have to consider. And as I said earlier on, with regards to the congestion, well, I made that. Dusty and myself in the gang, we made that decision 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, and obviously we knew, but I didn't know. If I knew back then how congested the roads were going to be, I'm not sure whether I would have. I'm on a 50-50. But obviously, here you're not gonna pull me out of here now. But if I knew what I know now, I could have. I'm not saying I would have, but I could have made a different call mark, because the congestion and the amount of time spent on the roads, and you miss that window. And if you have to be in Sydney in a certain time, a certain inspection, you could be not only 5, but you could be 15, 20 minutes late, and in the only one breakdown or accident, and you might as well turn around and as I said, work from home. But this is where we're getting at. So when you're making those decisions to buy and to rent, that's something that has to be front of mind now when you're going to be making those decisions, because it's not something that we can take for granted now. Even driving around Sydney throughout the day, going from one suburb to the next, inspecting homes and talking to people, and talking to clients, and real estate agents. It's the congestion over the last 12 months. It's just crazy. You can't even you want to pay. I'll pay more on the tolls if you meant that I was going to get a clear run. But even that doesn't guarantee you that you're going to get a clear run. Sometimes you're better off going through the back roads than you are going through the so-called motorways. And you get charged a fortune for it. So these are some things that the world is changing our world here is changing very, very rapidly. And on top of that, you just got to be extra careful out there, because there's some crazy people there driving, and especially those big rigs. You can't see who's behind those windows, but I tell you what, it's scary. It is scary, the shit that I see happening on the road.
No, I think it's very important. In fact, when I was living in Thirroul, when I first moved there, it was very, very quiet traffic-wise. Later on, we used to have the Thirroul traffic jams morning and evening, and it would be nose to tail all the way through the town, because there was just so much more traffic just coming down. And there's no doubt in my mind that these conditions are going to get worse. There's no real clear investment in terms of dealing with traffic congestion. Of course, it's very costly to do, but the exponential growth of traffic means that it's going to get worse. So not only think about what it's like today, and I've said to a few people, well, try making that journey in the rush hour and make sure that you're still happy with it, rather than, over on the weekend when it's lovely and quiet, because it's going to get worse. It's not going to get better. There are going to be more people, and that means that it's going to take longer. In fact, the average travel time across Sydney now is lower than it was in Victorian times for many people. So that's just worth thinking about, isn't it, Edwin?
Yeah, look, it is, and I'm sort of thinking about getting a helicopter's pilot's license, but no, like
there's got to be a way.
well,
Well,
to beat the traffic.
Yeah, you just want a big drone so you can sit in the middle of it and go, and off you go. Edwin, lovely to speak with you again. Thank you, as always. Great points made. And I'll look forward to doing it all again next week. Take care.
All the best, Martin. You take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.